Good day, Chairman. Nice to see. It's been some time, I feel like, since all three of us have been in the same Zoom chat at the same time. But good to have all of you here. And today's topic, I think, is another just good thing to consider. It's something that when I think backwards to even what the state of guitar pedals look like a decade ago or 20 years ago and how they've evolved to what we have now, there's been quite a jump in features. There's been quite a jump in the amount of money that pedals can cost relative to what they were. And with that in mind, I want to sort of think about, with other industry professionals such as yourselves, what might the future of pedals look like fast forwarding 10 years or 20 years based on maybe the trends that we see now and kind of how the evolution has looked. Or maybe you'll have some wild ideas of things that maybe we haven't even thought of that may be in existence as it relates to pedals in the future. And I can think of no better person to help facilitate and guide us through this conversation on our way to Tone Town than Mr. Grant Klassen himself. Grant, I shall turn it over to you.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I was thinking about this before the podcast because obviously we chatted about the topics beforehand. We don't just come up with them on the spot as we start. And I was thinking about this heading into it. But first, I wanted to ask you guys, very important question. If you can remember this far back, because we're all getting a little bit older. I wouldn't say we're on the decline yet, but we're still we're approaching
base.
The peak. Yeah, we're approaching the peak here. What was your first guitar pedal? Very first pedal you remember owning? What was it? Roughly how long ago? Like, what year approximately are we talking here? And I wanted to start there and see what you guys were thinking.
How funny is it that I was literally just looking at the guitar pedal I first bought this morning as for something else. It just worked out perfectly. I
mean, when you're in the same vehicle on the way to Tone Town.
I actually have a photo of it because I was using it to post. So if you're watching, it's really blurry, but Digitech. It is a Digitech RP50. I had to have been, I'm 29. I had to have gotten it when I was 12 or 13 because my friends wanted to start a band and I needed something. Yep. So I got it because it had a cool drum thing in it.
Yep.
I fucking never used it. But yeah, that was mine.
So around what you said, you're 29, 12 17 years ago.
Yeah. So whatever that was.
2005-ish.
Yeah, 2005.
That is the year I graduated high school, which also ages me as well. Brian is the spring chicken of the chairman of the boards and doing a great job, Brian. So, okay, yeah. So you had the Digitech, it's a multi-effects pedal for those that aren't aware.
Yeah.
Which fits in, it slots in nicely to what we're talking about today. Yeah. There's a more like foot pads, if you will.
Yes.
Like, those things are not small. Mason, what about yourself?
It was a TS9 that had some modification to it. I had bought it on eBay and I couldn't afford the Keeley one that was kind of like really hot at the time. This would have been like the early 2000s.
Yep.
Probably 2000. So it was like somebody who was kind of like, creating a modification, that was similar to the Keeley where they put in, the JRC 455.8 chip. And I got it on eBay, and that was my first guitar pedal. It was a TS9.
Nicely done.
Yeah.
Mine was a Dunlop wah, just the standard, as they come, crybaby wah. And I got it not understanding it at all. I mean, you think like there's not much to understand about a wah, but I just didn't. I just bought it. It looked cool, and I got it, and that's how it goes. I was probably 13, 14 years old at the time. So this would have been early 2000s. And I never really used it. I put on my board And when I was practicing, I'd click it on and go walk, 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 and then I'd turn it back off, not knowing how to put it into a song, and then I'd move on. And that was kind of my first pedal experience, and I can confidently say it only got better from there. That's a low bar, and the bar slowly raised over the years. But Mason, I think you would be a great person to chat us through. Can you talk us through maybe briefly the beginnings of guitar pedals, when they roughly first came out, the first guitar pedal? I know you're a whiz at this stuff. Why don't you talk us through
about the history of
not
guitar
the full
pedals?
history, just obviously we kind of start out with an electric guitar and a tube amp. That's
right.
That's where we begin. But what was the first guitar pedal? And let's not go through the full history, just maybe the beginnings.
Well,
Chapter 1.
We really need Josh Scott here because he could lead us through a historical recollection of.
And he could probably show us the original pedal. He probably owns it.
Right.
Probably does.
Yeah. Josh has the first pedal ever made.
Exactly.
I think that it all starts with fuzz, and so you have the Maestro and then the tone benders and the fuzz faces, and those are all, in the early to mid 60s that you start seeing the fuzzes coming around. And then it sort of evolves, from there into, you start to see other effects that are, modulation based, like a Univibe, and that's kind of the later part of the 60s. And, and you see electro harmonics start to come on the scene, then MXR, this is well before Dunlop, Ross, I'm just trying to think of companies this is, into the 70s by this time. But, the interesting thing is, most early pedals all had, this is unrelated, but sort of interesting, is all the early pedals, early fuzzes and stuff like that, they all had mechanical switches like we would find in a lot of pedals today. And then,
Nothing
by the time
controlled.
that Boss comes around, it's all moved to the FET, the little soft touch foot switches. And, and then by the 90s, when the boutique craze kind of hits everybody's back to mechanical switches. Of course, most vintage pedals were not true bypass, but, because they just didn't have enough pole pieces to do it, even if they wanted to. But just interesting that we're now back to mechanical switches. I suppose some people still use, relay switched, momentary switches, which didn't exist back then. But, it's interesting as far as the bypass is concerned, that we've kind of come full circle back to the original style of, butt contact, mechanical switches.
Which I think is interesting, because I think one of the things that might influence our conversation here is, and maybe part of what you're saying with coming full circle, is I think with the, introduction of the internet. Obviously, internet came in well before 2000, but things were becoming more widely available and searchable in the early 2000s. And I don't think it's any coincidence that we see, the hard switches, the 3PDT switches for bypass and true bypass and all that coming around again in the early 2000s and beyond, because now people like myself can start searching, schematic for a TS9 or how to build a guitar pedal and all this. And that is the easiest way to do it, is with a hard switch and a few analog components or, jelly bean parts, and you can start building your own pedals. And I think it's really cool. It's a pro and a con. Our industry is now flooded with pedals that are, to just paint it with a broad brush, are essentially the same. We have, repackaged TS9s all over the place that are built by people that are looking up circuits online. And I don't think that's a bad thing. But it does affect what we're talking about today, which is the, where are pedals going in the future? And there's only more and more schematics, more how-to videos, build your own this, build your own that, available to the everyday person, which can create an interesting dynamic, I guess, for the guitar player and the choice that they have available. But what are you guys' thoughts? What are your thoughts on people? And I'll put myself in this camp, so don't be too mean. I learned a lot of Goodwood stuff, or Goodwood started off of essentially YouTube videos and Googling with cables. Like, how do I build my own cable? How do I solder? And so I did not come out of, an electronic or electrical engineering degree and come into building Goodwood audio. So what are your thoughts on the internet coming in, giving people access to the stuff that they couldn't really access before easily, and now how it's affected the market? Good, bad, somewhere in between, pros and cons? What do you guys think?
I mean, I would say it's probably there's probably like a between, because there's it's the same thing, kind of like Mason doing his DIY channel. People that want to learn how to build pedal boards, how to build cabling. Same thing with pedals. Some people want to learn how to build a one loop true bypass buffer, like a one loop box. I wanted to learn how to do that kind of stuff. But then there's some people like, I don't have the time. I love these companies. I'll go buy it from them, off the shelf. And a lot of times it comes down to how impatient some people can be, because building a pedal the first time is not like, you're not going to get the cables and do it in 20 minutes like the guy on YouTube says you can do it. You can take some trial and error. The guy on YouTube's a liar. Yeah, I mean, like, maybe you can if you follow it, but sometimes, he may have filmed in a very low resolution, so you connected the wrong wire to the wrong pin on that hard click switch or something. So, but it comes down to that, is like, it is fun. It's fun to experiment, but I think there is a 50-50 between people that are like, man, I'm just going to let the professionals do it because they know what they're doing, and then I'll just buy it. But then there's some people like, no, I like to experiment. So
what do you think about how that affects the industry as a whole and products that may or may not be released? Let me rephrase it. Should people that are DIY be allowed, is the wrong word, but should they release products for the general public? You know what I mean? So you have access to this info, but does that mean you should distribute it to a wider audience?
So, I mean, that's the same thing when it comes to like people doing clones of pedals. Like, to a degree, it's like, sure, build a couple TS9s and give them to your friends for Christmas or something. Like, do it for fun. If it starts a business for you, fantastic. Like, that's cool. Yeah. But like, I've had people ask, because I'm not a manufacturer except for doing boards, like, the only way I can phrase it is like, I've had people like, man, I built a pedal board. Should I go and turn around and start offering it as a service? And I always tell people like, man, not till you get good at building that one product should you offer it to people. So it's the same thing with pedals. Like, don't build your first tube screamer and it work, and then you immediately list it on Reverb for $100. I'm quitting my job. $500. Yeah, babe, I'm quitting my job. And the wife's like, you have really good health insurance. Don't do that. So I mean, I'm not going to say no, because it's where I started doing something until I got good enough. And then now that's turned into my job. But like, it just grows business, and it grows, people's opportunity. So I'm not going to say no to it, because you never want to cap what someone wants to do with their vision or, dream or anything. Yeah. But I don't think Mason? It really hurts. Sorry, Brian. No, I was just going to say, I don't really think it hurts the industry. If anything, it confuses the industry, because we're in such pedal overload of options. Like the rack I did, we had so many options on that rack. It was like 35 pedals, and it just became a point where, well, there's this new, like the Zelza. Well, there's a new Zelza, but you have a Mobius, and you have an H9, and you have this pedal. Yeah, but this is another new pedal. Okay, cool. So like, I think that's it is. Yeah, it's shiny. It's cool. So I think that's where, like, if anything, that kind of stuff, overwhelms the market. Not like, it doesn't hurt the market.
What do you think, Mason?
Well, I'd love to tell you more about what my thoughts are on this, but I wanted to break for a moment to talk to you about two great sponsors that make this podcast possible every week. And I should remind you that by way of sponsoring this podcast and you supporting those sponsors, that is in turn helping us be able to continue to offer this as a weekly podcast. The first sponsor I'd love to talk to you about is none other than the Guitar Sanctuary. And if you're watching us on YouTube, you'll notice that Brian right now is transplanted into the Guitar Sanctuary in his area where he builds pedalboards. But not only do they offer amazing pedalboard services by way of Brian Omilion of Omilion Audio, they also are one of the foremost retailers as it comes to high-end boutique gear, everything from guitars to pedals to amplifiers. It's one of the best shops in the country, and I highly recommend that you check them out. That's theguitarsanctuary.com. You can check out all of their offerings, and if you're interested in having a pedalboard built, you can contact Brian through his email address, which will be linked in the show notes and also in the description if you're watching on YouTube. And secondly, I'd like to mention another one of our great sponsors, which is Sweetwater, and specifically their new site, which is the Gear Exchange. And this is essentially everything that I love about Reverb without the things that I dislike about Reverb. In particular, the exorbitant fees that seem to go up incrementally every single year. One thing that's great about Sweetwater's Gear Exchange is if you're a seller and you sell some high dollar item and you don't want to eat the fees, you have an option to put all of your earnings onto a Sweetwater gift card. And if you do that, you don't pay any fees at all. So if you're somebody like me that is frequently buying new things and you know that that money is going to get used through Sweetwater invariably, it's a great way to be able to save on fees and use their great service and site. Again, it's very similar to Reverb. Use listings for product and gear that is sold by other people in the community. It's a really, really amazing system, and you can check it out over at sweetwater.com/used, USED, and you can check out all the different listings that they have there. Sort of kind of like hybrided between like almost like Craigslist in a way and Reverb and eBay, and again, just seems to have worked out the bugs and really made it more about the customer and less about the business side of things. So I really, really love what it is that they're doing. And I've already been using this to buy and sell gear. So really happy with it. Definitely check those two sponsors out. Now let's get back to the question at hand, which is, I guess to rehash, Grant, and tell me if I'm misinterpreting this, around the future of pedals and kind of what we think. Brian sort of answered a question around sort of like new pedals coming out, how things have evolved. I want to make sure that I'm getting back to our touchstone here, where we started. Can you reiterate so I make sure that I'm answering this question correctly? I think I got just too into our sponsors because they're just so great.
Well, actually, this is a total side, and listening to the Sweetwater Gear Exchange thing, that you've actually got me pretty tempted. With the putting it onto a card thing. That's a cool idea. I legitimately didn't know that. That's great.
Yeah.
Basically, it was the availability of information online, which allows the everyday person, the DIYer, to now get into the market, make themselves pedals or gear, and then potentially start a business, which is how I started. Roughly, Brian started.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? How does that affect the industry and where we're headed in the future?
Well, I think as it relates to analog pedals, it's a really democratizing thing, and I think it's not unique to any of us that this has been a helpful resource, because I think in years past, or I guess I should even say decades past, because it probably hasn't been done like this for most people for a long time, is that you would have to be studying various books on electronics, or maybe you'd be reading, a Craig Anderton, article in a Guitar Player magazine about, integrated circuits or other things that he may write about. And then you're sort of parsing together all these different pieces that you can't really get in a consolidated format. So I think that one thing that the internet has done is it's sort of democratized the ability for people to be able to learn about this stuff, whether they decide to translate that into a business or not. It can be variable, but I'm sure that if you were to speak to a cross section of, let's say, the top 100 pedal builders in the industry, I would say most of them are going to have some parallel, around having looked up stuff on the internet, having taught themselves, at least in part, how to do this on the internet, and then maybe they go and develop specific skills from there. And it can be a great way to start. I would say it's most certainly not the only thing that you need in order to start a pedal business. And I think what most people find is that as they start to develop whatever it is that they've learned on the internet into a business, they realize that there's so many different things that you don't know about running a business that is totally unrelated to the building of the effects. And it turns out that knowing how to build the product is only maybe 10 or 15% of the job. And so this is kind of where it can be a reality check for the hobbyist that's trying to translate it into a business, because you're not yet having to think about things like, workers' comp insurance or payroll taxes or marketing or manufacturing at scale or, customer service or dealerships. There's all these other things that are sort of bundled together that, in the innocence of building, a DIY tube screamer in your garage, you're just not part of the thought process. But I do think that the internet it will continue to democratize this stuff. And I think even in the digital realm, although that's not something that I'm super well versed in, there's a lot of places where, people will exchange ideas, or if they're working in a specific, chipset, like, I don't know, the spin chips, there's people that often will share ideas or ways that they've programmed these particular chips for either efficiency or to get certain sounds, and then people can use those or borrow from that or take that and amend or manipulate whatever it is that somebody else has done. And there's a lot of free options to explore, just like there would be, on the analog side on a DIY stomp boxes or something like that. So I think that it's great. I think it certainly has already created some great pedal companies that we all have heard of and revere. And I presume it will continue to do that. One thing that I'm almost more curious about is like, we see things like the evolution of MIDI into almost everything now, right? And in 10 years ago, this was not, you would rarely see MIDI outside of kind of like delay, reverb, maybe some modulation, certainly only digital stuff. I don't know that you'd really ever see it on analog stuff. If that was sort of, I would say that that's probably been one of the defining characteristics of this current generation of pedals, is like everything has got MIDI equipped, everything is moved to, or a lot of stuff is moved to 1/4-inch MIDI, or 1/8-inch MIDI. We're seeing overdrives and distortion pedals with MIDI, which you rarely would see ever before. It seems like the trend right now is like super small pedals, lots of options, lots of knobs, lots of dip switches. I mean, if Chase Bliss is any indication of like, a new style that's been sort of carved out in the last 10 years, that's certainly got to be, one of the more groundbreaking and unique, not only in terms of the sound, but in terms of like the look and the number of options that it offers relative to anything else that had been out before it. And I think that could even extend as far as the reverb pedal with the automated faders and the preamp as well. So I'm kind of curious, like what will the equivalency of those be fast forwarding 10 years?
And I think it's interesting you say that as well about MIDI, because so you're talking about MIDI, which is, a very old protocol, maybe, I don't know, 80s, something like 80s, that. Yeah. And then you're talking about analog guitar pedals, very old technology for the most part, 60s and onwards. And what I'm curious about with all this, fast forwarding 10 years, is will we even still have MIDI, or will we finally get a new protocol or a new language or a new operating approach to these guitar pedals? Because, I guess the big thing to hopefully chat about at some point in this conversation is with guitar pedals, the technology in guitar pedals following the technology that's released in bigger industries, computers, and, let's just take Apple as an example, what they're able to do now. Eventually, some of this stuff is going to filter its way down into guitar technology and guitar pedals. And You go.
Sorry,
Brian.
go ahead. Sorry, I was just gonna say that some of that technology, like the UA pedals, where you can connect to them like via Bluetooth. So I mean, I've seen a little of it, but yeah, I see what you're saying.
But like even Bluetooth that came out in the late 90s. Like I think it was invented in 99, 2000, something like that. And it took 10, 12 years for it to make it into a guitar pedal. And so it just like guitar is a small industry in comparison to others, and it trails the leading technology by quite a bit. But the other cool thing about technology is that the gaps between new innovations only get smaller. And so it like 10 years from now, like I think the temptation is, well, what have we done over the last 10 years from 2012 to 2022? I think it's going to be more like, well, we might see that kind of innovation for the last 10 years, maybe in the next 5, maybe in the next 4 years, we'll have that same kind of leap forward. It'll be really interesting to see. So I think 10 years from now, the gaps are going to be massive. Like, I don't even think we'll recognize, some of the technology that's coming out 10 years from now. We can't even fathom it in my mind. Like I was thinking before the podcast, like VR is a huge thing right now. How is that going to potentially integrate into guitar pedals? Maybe you have a VR headset and you're able to edit all your settings across your whole pedal board, and then it's all loaded and saved, or you can access that might come out in the next 4 years. Who knows? Like it's ridiculous to think what might be happening.
Listen, if you ever offer a VR meta build a pedal board experience, I am the first one to sign up. If I can be in the same room as you and we're looking up at the sky and there's pedals and we're grabbing stuff and we're
or people could watch you could live stream through VR so people can basically like see what you see, Brian.
That would be interesting. I have had someone ask me that. I'm like, I don't know how to do that.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's not that far-fetched is all I'm saying. It could very well be the thing. I'd
love to see those videos of the VR worship leader fails, where they're on stage during a worship service and they're trying to like adjust their H9 and then they come off stage.
Yeah. Yes. So it'll be interesting to see. Yes. But I mean, before we move forward and what we would like to see, let's take the last 10 years again. What has been your guys' favorite innovation as far as guitar pedals go, or maybe the one that you find the most useful on a day-to-day basis? What's been the best thing that's happened for guitar pedals and pedal boards in the last 10 years? Other than the Travel Light pedal board series.
Oh man, I don't know that I can necessarily point to a specific pedal. I think one of the things that has maybe been, I don't know that I would say it's the most technologically advanced, because I'm sure that there's other things technologically that are more advanced than this. But I would say there's kind of like two parts to my answer to this. I think one of it is related to sort of the hybridization of using sort of vintage equipment and in making it compatible with new digital gear. So I'm thinking of things like the aux, things like which is the UA sort of attenuator and speaker in cabinet and microphone simulation. Equally, what Two Notes has done with their whole technology and software as it relates to impulse responses and things of that nature. And there's been other companies that have equally done really cool stuff as it, relates to sort of integrating vintage tube amps and then providing these emulated, digital equivalents of some of the other pieces of hardware that you would pair with the tube amp, but sort of makes it more seamless, like the Sur reactive load IR or the Fryette power load. Those are kind of maybe two less popular versions than the aux, but also really excellent. And I think that's like a really cool thing, which is not necessarily using and the impulse response technology is obviously kind of newer and something that really kind of came to fruition in our industry in the last 10 years, but is also combining, things that have been around for a really long time, like the reactive loads, in trying to, give an amp something that looks like a speaker, that loads it properly and safely, hopefully, and then gives you these options to kind of enrich it with impulse response. I think that that's like a really cool piece of technology that certainly from where I'm standing as a guitar player is really valuable to me, and certainly for people that are in areas where they can't have an amplifier at full volume or use a 412 cabinet. It's opened up new doors to be able to have a really great playing experience where you can use the full capabilities of your amp without having to, go into a rehearsal space in order to make it happen. So I think that is really cool. But I think also on the other side of things, I think that as we were kind of talking about earlier, one of the biggest innovations I think is around sort of, again, the democratization of information around not only how things work, but how to best use it. And I think things like YouTube, I think channels like Josh Scott's, I think channels like that Pedal Show have been really instrumental in informing a, kind of formerly maybe less educated audience, and not through any fault of their own. It's just like a lot of this information was never in one place. So you had to be a good researcher of all these different resources, and then understanding how to like even vet that information to figure out what's right and what's not. Right now, people can go to a myriad of channels and get pretty good information about understanding things like signal path, or understanding things like buffers, or understanding the difference between true bypass pedals and buffered pedals and the consequences between them. So now people understand more about how to optimize the equipment that they have that formerly was just not something that was sort of universally available. And you would get, 300 different responses in a chat room about how to use a TS9 or where to put it in the right place. And you wouldn't have any sense of the qualifications of anybody who is giving you input. Now you have sort of industry experts that are able to sort of demystify this sort of stuff for you. And you can not only find information about that, but you can find information about power supplies, pedalboard materials, DIY tips, and it's all consolidated into one person's channel. And you can find, multiple channels that will fulfill that same thing. So I think informationally, there's been a huge leap forward, and I think that YouTube is largely credited for that resource. And then I think secondly, stuff that's sort of bridging the gap between stuff that a lot of people really love that are like tone snobs that take, the best elements of the analog world that, people want to kind of keep intact, and then sort of bridging that with technology to, give you some of the benefits of the digital world.
Love it. What about you, Brian? Any favorites from the last 10 years? Things that weren't available maybe when you had your Digitech multi-effects unit?
I would definitely say the aux box, especially from a point of using, because I have a couple amps at home and I love how they sound, but in the circumstance of where I play, live amps aren't, I can't use them. So being able to still utilize the amp instead of it just sitting at home has been really good. So yeah, I would say the aux, and man, that's hard. I want to go and say like a switcher or something, like something RJM switcher, because I'm a huge RJM fan. I have the PBC-10 and I absolutely love it. I think when I was starting out looking at the switchers and stuff, Disaster Area Designs was a big one, because I saw, Jeffrey Cundy, when you guys did when he did his board, and he had that DPC-8 and the bigger, I think DMC-8 or something, the 6, and like that whole idea for me, I was like, what? Like this whole like one tap changes everything was so crazy for me at the time. But like now, like having the PBC-10 and like doing programming consultations with people and them saying, well, can it do these things? And I'm like, oh yeah, that's nothing. And like, what? I'm like, oh yeah, you can send a MIDI command to your computer while doing this on your devices. Like the whole one tap changes everything that Disaster would say really does come into play when it comes to like all the RJM switches stuff. It's awesome. So yeah, I would definitely say the whole PBC-10, PBC-6, MagX, all of those, they just, that's for sure. That's definitely my number one.
I think is awesome, and it brings up a point I wanted to touch on, which is collaboration and how collaboration has become more involved, which I think we should get into after Mason chats about a couple of our amazing sponsors.
Yes. Two amazing sponsors that make this podcast possible every week. Our friends over at Mono and our friends over at Pedal Genie. Let's talk about Mono first because I'm a big believer in their products. I use their double gig bag routinely so that I'm able to take a Strat style guitar and some sort of humbucking style guitar, whether that be a Les Paul or a 335. And they have an amazing gig bag for that. But not only do they have great gig bags, they have great pedal boards, which Grant and Brian have often used, in addition to amazing cases. It really offers the level of protection that you might find in some hard cases, but in a soft and portable version that really Mono has sort of been alone on that hill as far as kind of being at the top of the game for a very long time as it relates to quality cases. And Mono is offering our listeners a really special discount using the discount code Chairmen, CHAIRMEN. You get 10% off anything at the Mono website, which is monocreators.com. And again, use the discount code Chairman and get 10% off anything in their store. Again, an exclusive deal for our listeners only. Really great stuff, very high quality stuff, highly recommended. And then secondly, our friends at Pedal Genie. And if you've never heard of Pedal Genie, this is in essence the Netflix of pedal rentals. In the old days of Netflix, you used to select which DVDs or, Blu-rays that you wanted to get, and they would mail those out to you. And then you would be able to watch them at your leisure and then send them back and then select other videos and DVDs that you wanted to come your way. This is very similar, except instead of with DVDs and Blu-ray, it's with guitar pedals. And Pedal Genie has made it easy to really be able to select the gamut of any pedal that is out there, select which things that you want to receive, get those in the mail, be able to experiment with them on your own time. Again, it's not like you have to buy anything. You're not required to buy any of these pedals. This is strictly by way of rentals. And if you want to buy something, of course, you can buy it from them or from some of our other sponsors because they do also have a retail component to Pedal Genie. But one of the cool things that I think is really great about Pedal Genie, you can select how many pedals that you want to receive on a monthly basis. You get the option to choose which pedals you want, you get to try them at the convenience of your own home. You don't have to worry about return policies or anything like that. And Chairman of the Board's listeners get 50% off their first month using the discount code BOARD, BOARD. So head over to Pedal Genie, which is PEDALGENIE.com, pedalgenie.com, and use the discount code BOARD for 50% off your first month at whatever tier that you choose in terms of how many pedals that you'd like to receive each month. Now, let's get back to it. So, Grant, where were we?
I think one of my favorite things, two of them, one super practical and maybe a bit more boring, and one of them that I want us to discuss a little bit here. But the first one, I think my favorite, practically speaking, over the last 10 years has been from Eventide, and that has been the H9, which I don't think it's been out more than 10 years at this point. I could be wrong.
Yeah, it's probably around there.
Yeah, H9's been out for a little bit, but the idea that you can control your pedal via Bluetooth from your phone, adjust settings in real time, that was something, when I was using H9s a lot, I used all the time, to the point where I didn't really, and it still don't, if I'm going to be honest, know how to really get into the H9 menu. Obviously, the H90, its successor has recently come out, which gives you a bit more flexibility in that area. I still don't really know how to use the H9 with the physical buttons on the pedal. I always get my phone out, and I loved that feature. I thought that was great. And obviously something you would never have seen in the 90s, 80s, and before. So it just wasn't possible. So that was practically, but I think the best thing that has happened, not just in the guitar industry, but beyond, is people's desire and dare I say craving, that may be too far, but people love to collaborate. And I think that's where the industry is really going to shine moving forward. I think people want experiences, maybe even more so than they want a physical, piece of gear. I think having an experience and how that maybe lines up with our industry would be really interesting to see how it all plays out. And so, like what you said before, whether or not people can like get in with Brian while they're building his board and be like, oh, what do you think about doing, like almost like they're in the room with him. Right. I think integrating that type of option or that type of technology, whatever that looks like, I have no idea. But integrating that into the guitar industry, into the music industry, is something that we just won't be able to avoid. Yeah. And I think it'll be, I think it'll be really interesting to see how that all plays out over the next few years.
I'm excited to see Brian do POV pedal boards where he's wearing like a body cam and has like the
Have I already considered buying a head mount GoPro mount for my GoPro and strap it on my head? Because I do tutorial videos when I do board build, when I do like overview of the board. But I think it would get boring because it would be like working on a board, answering an email, responding to my wife's text message, working on a board, taking a bite of a food because I don't stop for lunch. I just like eat while I work because
you need to get a beer helmet, Brian, and you can just fill it with triple filtered water. So you could just have it just right on your head, and then that way you have some more surface area to mount your GoPro.
It would be two. One would have triple filter water from Starbucks, and the other one would have the Arizona RX. They just call it RX Energy. It's like this orange juice tea. But yes, I should do that. But yeah, no, yeah.
It's not prescription.
No.
Prescription iced tea.
It should be. I drink it enough.
Let me ask you guys this question, and I was kind of thinking about it as Grant was talking, and maybe this will help as a jumping off point of what pedals might look like in the future. Who do you think in the last 10 years have been the most influential pedal companies in terms of their product, like the pervasiveness of their products in the marketplace? And I want to maybe say, like, obviously there's big players like Boss and stuff like that have always sort of been a major player, but maybe players that more than 10 years ago were not in the conversation and now are very much in the conversation and are sort of ubiquitous in our industry. What are you think those kind of like really, really key companies as far as pedals are concerned in the last 10 years that are really like, kind of at the zeitgeist of the between, let's say, 2012 and 2022?
Oh man, as in they did exist before that, but really came into their own.
Maybe they did exist, but that they've kind of like created, or they've had a significant impact or shifted the way that we see pedals or the way that we use pedals or the types of pedals that we might use. Like I'm thinking in particular, like I think Strymon is in that conversation. I think that Chase Bliss is in that conversation. I would say in some respects, JHS is in that conversation. I think that in terms of, I would almost say more importantly than his pedals, and I'm not taking anything away from his pedals, I would say like the social element that JHS has introduced into the industry is really unparalleled. Like the connectivity between pedal buyers and information and education and creating community, like nobody has done that. And I think he is really great at creating this community and enriching it. And really you would think that like a bigger company, like a Boss or whatever, would be more interested with the amount of resource that they have in taking on something like that. In what I really think that he did that was a missed opportunity by a lot of bigger companies is that they didn't reinvest in their customers in a way that was going to keep a full pipeline of people that were continually coming back to them, because not only did they offer great products, but they galvanized musicians. And I think it's interesting that a company and that's not to say that JHS is small, because they're not, but relative to an Eventide or a Boss or an MXR or Dunlop, Josh is certainly smaller, and yet he's the guy that is doing everybody a service in terms of keeping the conversation going, creating interest, generating conversation around this stuff that it was never really there before, in kind of, giving people the opportunity and the space to be able to have dialogue around this stuff. And nobody else was really front loading or kind of like filling the top of the funnel in that way, because their businesses, are just so profit driven. And that's not, I'm not mad at them about that. But I think Josh has figured out a way to really balance that stuff. And so when he comes out with a product, there's a tremendous amount of people that want to support that product, beyond the fact that it's going to be well built and that it's going to sound good. People are inspired by that, and I think that everybody owes him a big debt of gratitude in the pedal business. And I still think it's a bummer that you're not seeing the Bosses or the Line 6s or the MXR or Dunlop Way Huge reinvesting in their customers like that. Because he has made a point he's made it his business to not just make great pedals, but in parallel provide education and support to people on a regular basis, and it's very inspiring. I have huge respect for what he's done, and I also think that other companies should be doing this. And I'm hoping that other companies will see what he's doing and be like, yeah, we actually really need to do that, because we need to create customers for the next 50 years in order for the legacy of our brand to continue and thrive. Because I think that this is the direction that social media has pushed things, where people want to be connected to the ownership of the company. They want to be connected to the leader of the company, and they want to be inspired by the companies and brands that they support. And I think Josh did a great job at that.
Well, just to add to that, that's just like what Grant was saying, like the collaboration of the company and the buyer, whoever it is. This, to me, and I'm going to just add on about JHS, because they were the first one I thought about, is what Josh and them are doing with all these shows. I just watched the one that he did about the clown one. That is like the tip of the iceberg of what I think is to come, because someone like me, especially during COVID, everyone had to, they were watching more video stuff. There was everyone, up their video game and stuff. And, they definitely took off on that and did behind the scenes. People love behind the scenes stuff. People love, that's why when you want to go backstage at that concert, because you want to see all the cool backstage stuff. I mean, at least I do. I don't know. People probably want to meet the musicians. I like to see the cool stuff. But it's the same thing. You're basically getting a backstage into the shop to see what they're doing, and you're seeing them in real life. They're not just a perfectly typed post or perfectly taken edited photo or video. It's raw and it's real. So I agree with you on JHS and Strymon. I think another one I would add, and maybe they're definitely in the newer of the group, is like Morningstar Engineering. Like those guys, they have also taking the time to create an experience that when you're watching their videos, like, man, I really want to go try that. Like, it's like a movie commercial for their pedal. And it all has to do with budget and everything on what they can do, because some companies can't. But like, taking that next step to create a really cool promotional material that really hooks your clientele in and makes them go, man, I really want to try that. Like, that's really cool. So I would add Morningstar to that list.
The thing I like, a couple thoughts on what you guys have said, that with Morningstar being the first one, is it's cool to start seeing other companies challenge Morningstar on their approach to MIDI controllers and all that. The first one that comes to mind is a company called Pirate MIDI out of Australia. And they're coming up with some cool stuff. And you could look at this like maybe as the company owner, let's say, which I don't, let's say I owned Morningstar. It's like, oh, there's my competition. I need to squash them. But the benefit to the consumer is now it's like, well, now Morningstar is being challenged in their industry. Everyone has to step up. The competitors do, Morningstar does, whatever other company is. RJM might change some of their approaches due to what they're seeing in other fields, gig rig, and so on and so forth. And so I think, having these more access to technology for everyone means that everyone benefits from it. And I know, when Goodwood first started out, we were building some, just basic junction boxes and stuff, and there weren't too many other people doing, very similar things. I'm not saying we invented them, because we absolutely did not. There just wasn't as much competition. And then I'd see other companies come up with very similar looking products. And it was always a good thing. Like I looked at like, oh, that's a cool approach. I wouldn't have thought of that. And it forced me to think, what else am I missing? And what other areas can I improve in? And so we benefited from competition. With JHS, I really do think that they will not be the ones we will see innovating hard technology on pedals. But they are doing something I would argue is much harder to do, which Mason mentioned. They're innovating in the social aspect and, putting themselves out there as a knowledge base resource. And with what Mason, you said, more companies should do it. I think like if Boss tried to do that or MXR, I don't have any attachment to the person behind MXR or Boss. I just don't care because they haven't built themselves out to be that. They built themselves out to be a corporation. It was Boss specifically and Roland. And so I don't have any emotional connection. I see a great product. Like I really want to buy that. I connect with their product. Josh has done an amazing job Josh is JHS, literally his initials, JHS. You know what I mean? And so if Josh disappears, so does a lot of that credibility he's built up over the years, which is both good and bad. I think it'll just be really interesting to see what happens there. But I all that to say, I do not think we will be talking in 5 years saying, oh, JHS just came out with this unbelievably innovative product. I think we will be saying they build awesome products. We're well educated on them and we want to buy them because we know we'll get a consistent, great pedal from JHS.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think his biggest contribution to the industry will be sort of the social aspect and the conversations that he created around gear. And that's not to diminish anything with the pedals. And I'm sure that there's going to be JHS classics just like there are with, all of the legacy brands. But I agree. I think from a technological standpoint, it's not going to be like something that you might see from Chase Bliss in terms of the technological advancements. And that brings me to another thing that I was thinking about, which is sort of like, and I think maybe getting back to the core of the question is it seems to me the trend that I'm noticing is that there are kind of like these two extremes that exist, or that are starting to kind of make their way into, I wouldn't say make their way into the industry, but are seeming to become more exaggerated, where you have these really, really technology-rich products that have lots of options and MIDI and all of these bells and whistles and things like that are kind of existing on one end of the industry. And then you have the other end, which is sort of like super vintage fidelity to the way that it was done, sort of like really sort of arcing back to the sort of one-to-one replica sort of way of doing things. And you find customers that sort of self-segregate themselves into those two different camps, or maybe there are some overlap, but in the middle, there's all of these pedals that maybe 20 years ago were like the types of pedals that people wanted, which are like, tons of sort of replica bass, 3 and 4 knob overdrives, really sort of simple, simple circuits that maybe are based on other things. I feel like that sort of pedal that was the zeitgeist of like the 2010s, so when you're seeing like, again, 3 knob overdrive replicas, whether that be Blues Breakers or Clons or whatever, that are kind of replica based, that are not going like all in and saying, okay, we're one-to-one replicating a Klon, or we're one-to-one replicating a 1981 TS808, and it's going to look the same and it's going to have the same PC board. I think that you're going to see sort of a no man's land in the middle of the pedals that, that are easier to make, that the DIY community, can start to, sink their teeth into, and you can have sort of a relatively limited skill set and still be able to reproduce. And you're seeing a lot of companies right now that are sort of taking those types of pedals and then releasing really budget versions of them, like, Josh Scott with the 3 Series. Is kind of taking what formerly was a $200 boutique pedal that had 3 knobs and making it into a $99 budget pedal, because I think that like the level of interest in those types of pedals, that part of the market became so saturated where there's like 300 companies that make a blues breaker, or 300 companies that make a TS9, or 300 companies that make a Klon replica, or, you know, a CE2 chorus, or, you know, an analog, you know, a basic analog delay, or a DM2 kind of based analog delay, that it's not inspiring to a lot of people anymore. They either want to go like fully down the rabbit hole and get like a fully vintage replica or a 1-to-1 replica of whatever that thing is, or they want to go like with the really enriched technology that has all the bells and whistles and kind of is at the cutting edge of the industry. And then the stuff in the middle is just kind of like, there's so much competition for those spots that it's going to be the big names that are going to kind of hold that, you know, the Dunlops and, you know, the Bosses and stuff like that. They're always going to kind of own that middle ground territory. And so the differentiators are really more at the fringes and not in the middle anymore, because so many pedals are coming out that are kind of all in that, you know, continuing to replicate the same circuits that are already out there. There's just not enough differentiators at that point. And from the consumer standpoint, it's like drinking water from a fire hose. There's just too many options and nobody can really choose. And so they end up sort of all cannibalizing from each other, unless you're at like the really, really, you know, most well-known a part of the industry, again, like the Bosses, the Dunlops, people like that. So I sort of see there being this push to kind of go more vintage correct and like really, you know, go like, you know, 1-to-1 to the way that things were done, or to go and utilize the technology that's available and kind of try to create something that's, you know, again, utilizing all the cutting edge stuff. I think the middle ground is going to become more and more diluted as the years go by.
I agree.
Nice. So we are probably coming close to the end, but I did want to chat about one more thing. But first, let's hear from a couple of our sponsors, and then we'll get into predictions for the next 5 to 8, 10, whatever, however many years. But let's check out some of our sponsors.
Yeah, so I think the first sponsor here, and you know, first of all, big shout out to Brian for doing a killer job on Bradford Mitchell of Worship Tutorials Pedalboard. I'd like to say that we tag teamed it, although I think that Brian did a lot more work on it than I did. But one thing that I really appreciated and about the beauty of that board is it was using exclusively one of our sponsors' materials, our friends over at Creation Music Company. All of their mini cakes and their right angle plugs were used exclusively for this board. It was a giant switcher board using a PBC 10, lots of pedals, lots of options. Really, really beautifully done by the man himself, Brian Omilion. And our friends over at Creation not only create great pedal boards and great materials like their mini cake plugs and other 1/4-inch plug offerings, but they just have amazing products altogether. Whether you're ordering pedal boards from them, they have a variety of different styles. Whether you're ordering, you know, pass-through interface boxes from them, they have so many great things that are a great resource for pedal board builders to have. Whether you're doing it DIY style or you're going to buy something and send it to a professional like Grant or Brian, Creation is offering our listeners a special 15% off discount using the code Chairmen15. And you can head over to creationmusiccompany.com, shop for the things that you need, add it to your cart, use the promo code Chairman15 and get 15% off your order. It is a great deal, absolutely amazing products. Also, I want to talk about another place where I get almost all my materials from as it relates to pedalboard building supplies, whether that be things like dual lock, 2.1 millimeter barrel connectors that I use for the power supplies, or square plugs, Mogami cable, stuff that I use every single day is often coming from our friends at Bestronix. And Bestronix is a great resource for really any pedalboard builder to have, and they sell pretty much every cable that you can imagine under the sun. They also have their own house brand, which is really actually super high quality cable, really low capacitance, really, really high quality stuff. And again, they have all the materials you'll need, whether it's square plugs, whether it's Neutrik, whether it's Switchcraft. They have everything that you can imagine. Is a pedalboard builder's dream website. It's btpa.com, and they're offering a special discount code to Chairman of the Board's listeners where they get 10% off using the code DACHIRS, DACHIRS, just like the old Saturday Night Live skit, Da Bears, where it takes a group of Chicagoans and puts them in the same room and they talk about sports. This is where this coupon code comes from. Absolutely amazing stuff, and I highly recommend that you check out Bestronics. Again, the coupon code is DACHAIRS, CHAIRS, DACHAIRS, 10% off at Bestronics website. So go check that out. All right, Grant, predictions.
Okay, so we've talked, a bit about where the industry has come over the last 10 years, but I would love to listen back to this episode in maybe 5 years' time and see who was on the money, if any of us. So what do you guys think? Next 5 or 10 years, what would you like to see? What do you think we're going to see as far as pedals, technology, and beyond kind of goes? Who wants to start us off?
I can go. I think I have 2. One, I think we'll see from a switcher standpoint, more pedal companies adopting the Bluetooth or Wi-Fi capability to where you can actually connect to your phone, because that is if you could do a switcher with the H9 app where you can actually go in and change stuff around, it would be insane. Instead of having to pull out a computer, that would be amazing. So I could see that being one. And then I don't know, the second one I had, but then I realized that it's already out.
You can't predict something that's already happened, Brian.
Yeah. Well, I think more companies will adopt the whole there's a lot of 2-in-1 pedals. Bradford's board, there are a bunch of 2-in-1s. But you see more companies that are I'm pull the Jackson Early Bloom, great pedal, great. So it has a boost, EQ, and a compression in it. But if you're using it in a switcher, that loop has to always be on or something. So I could see more companies maybe using stereo jacks where you could actually split the pedal, stuff like that. That's a big and that's a big factor I've told the guys at Jackson, hey, you should do that. More switchers, our people want to individualize or rearrange the loop order. So I could see more companies doing that. I know it's something that's already out, but not enough companies are doing it. So I hopefully expect in the next 5 years, those 2 for me. That's what and something with VR, but that's not pedal related.
There we go.
pedal boards.
Mason, any predictions?
Yeah, so I predict that we're going to continue to see refinement on power supplies. It seems like everybody is now switching over to switch mode. I think linear power supplies will be pretty much gone. I think we're going to continue to see more powerful, smaller, better gray in terms of the audio quality aspect power supplies. I think that we're going to see better quality buffers. I mean, one thing that I hope that would happen, and this is, this could very easily be construed as tooting my own horn, but I feel like I and many other rig builders have been continuing to sort of preach the gospel of high quality buffers, and that many pedals do not have high quality buffers in them. And I'm seeing that more companies seem to be investing, and I'm not saying that it's a result of anything that we're saying, but I'm hoping that it will have some influence where it will end up being better for the customers, where they will have better quality pedals with better quality buffers that we'll see as the standard moving forward, and we won't see, the, noisy, JFET, FET kind of cheap throwaway buffers that companies just sort of institute blindly. And I think as, the customers become more educated, I also think that they'll hold the pedal brands to account and demand higher standards as that it relates to the quality of buffers. So I think that we will see pedals with better quality buffers moving forward. I think that, MIDI 2.0 is going to be a thing that's going to really revolutionize a lot of different pedals, even stuff that maybe is existing, and we'll have redesigns of things that maybe are already in existence to kind of adapt to all the features and enrichments that will bring. I think that switchers are going to become more robust. I think they're going to become smaller. I think that, we're going to see, I'm really excited to see what RJM comes out with. I think that their PBC 10 is due for a facelift, and I'm really excited to see what that facelift is going to look like. Is it going to look like Kenny Rogers, or is it going to be a tasteful facelift? I'm sure it will. I'm sure it will be tasteful. Just a very mild brow lift. And so I'm excited to see what that looks like. And, I think that there's going to be a lot of cool products that are going to be coming out to support that the ampless sort of trend. And I think that that's going to continue. And, things like the Goodwood audio long line, I think that that's just the start of a lot of products that are coming around to help address and support people that are using ampless rigs. And I think we're going to continue to see a lot of cool evolution of stuff that can help kind of make, the digital modeling stuff maybe more tubey, whether that's kind of like coming out with cool preamps that kind of help support and make it sound more like a real amp, or whether that's, again, using stuff like, what Grant has come out with, where, you can basically replace what was formerly, 2 SGIs and all the send and receive boxes, and kind of consolidating that into a more compact and efficient unit that's really sort of purpose built for pedal boards. And so I'm really excited to see how that evolves as well. And those are just a few of the ones that I can think of off the top of my head. But Grant, what about you?
First, I have one really quick question for you guys that came up as Mason was chatting. Yes or no, are we ever going to move away from a 1/4-inch jack for the standard, the industry standard on pedals?
No,
Will it ever happen?
So.
Okay, Brian?
No, I don't.
It's too entrenched. All the hard. It would have to be adopted by so many people in order to get a critical mass. I think it's too hard.
Or just a couple big companies, and everyone else would be kind of forced to change. It was just a thought that, as you're saying, switchers getting smaller. I'm like, the biggest hindrance to a switcher getting smaller is the size of the jack. Yeah. Like that, the hardware is the biggest issue there. It's not the software or what you need to run the software. It was just a passing thought.
Yeah. Listen, I've seen people ride over people adding 1/8-inch for MIDI, let alone not having 5 pins. So I mean, I don't know what would happen if they took away 1/4-inch.
The 1/8-inch switcher.
Or
banana. What are those TT plugs?
Oh, the banana
TT plugs. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, so my predictions, I have 2 main ones I would chat about. The first one being, which is a little bit of an ironic one, I think, with the amp and cab sims and, let's say, multi-effects, quad cortex, axe effects, all that, they are trying to digitally replicate a vintage technology, and no one has perfected that yet. I think in 5 years, we are going to see massive improvements in replicating the imperfections that we as guitar players love to hear. A tube that's being overdriven, or transistors being pushed into overdrive and clipping and all this. I think we'll see advancements there. I do say that reluctantly because I love the true analog circuits. Not as much as Mason, as we found in previous episodes, but I do love them. So I think it'll get to the point where we sit down and maybe doing a blind test, even in front of speakers, and it will be very hard feel-wise, which is my big thing. Feel-wise, it'll be very hard to tell the difference. That's my prediction for the next 5 years. In the next 10 years, my prediction is that we will be able to sit in a meeting like this and have a latency-free concert collaboration while we're all playing through our own individual rigs. I think that is something that will happen in the next 10 or so years. And if I'm right, I'm pumped about it, because that opens up, you could play with anybody, anywhere in the world. And I think that would be incredible. So yeah, I think those would be my two big predictions for 5 and 10 years from now. Obviously, there's a whole bunch of other things we could chat about, but I would be pumped if any of that happened.
Yeah, let's have a super shredder event.
Imagine a band going on tour to all 10 locations on the same night.
Exactly, and all the bands, like each member in the band is in a different location around the world, playing to different venues around. Like, it would just be absolutely crazy. But
it's going to be a mouthful.
One's on a boat.
I think the technology could get there. You know, who knows?
Say, we love you, Houston, Dallas, Orlando.
Oh my gosh.
But it'll be interesting to see what happens there. But the future of guitar pedals. That was a fun episode, guys. Any closing thoughts or remarks before we finish up?
Well, firstly, Grant is too cool to do this, but check out the Goodwood Audio long line. If you are a person that is used to using SGIs or TA links or a lot of those products that you would use to be able to adapt a unbalanced signal to a balanced one, or you're using amplifier simulator, whether that's an ACS1, an Iridium, a UA, Dream, Woodrow, etc. This is a fantastic product for you to consider and check out. It is well built, as you would expect from anything that is from Goodwood Audio, and I highly recommend that people check it out. Is one thing that I would like to say as we complete. Otherwise, I feel like I left all my cards on the table.
I'm going to add to that. I got to admit, this box, this new enclosure is beautiful. Like, it's a great pedal. It can do a lot more than just be a long line. You know, I've had a lot of people ask questions, so I also too applaud that.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate that. I don't feel like this is the avenue for me to plug Goodwood products, but if you guys do it for me, I won't stop
we
you.
will.
So thank you very much. No, I think we are in for some fast changing technology in the guitar industry. I think it's going to be really exciting. And especially for those of you that aren't aware, as pedal builders and people building products with any chips or digital components or whatever it might be, right now is a horrible time to be a guitar pedal builder because there are chip shortages everywhere. So I know a bunch of companies, myself being one of them. I don't know if this has affected you as much, Mason, or not, but I assume it has. Like, you have the products to build, you have the designs, you have the circuits, but you don't have the chips, basically the heart or the brain of the pedal. They just are not available, or they've gone up tenfold in price, and so it's just not economical to build. But once we get through this chip shortage that was caused by COVID, it'll be really interesting to see the potential flood of new ideas and new innovations that have been, kind of on the back burner over the last
I think you'll
few
see
years.
some release floods as kind of stuff normalizes, where there's kind of been things that have been in waiting, and then now that the circumstances have changed, there's going to be these massive releases.
Yeah. So I think we have an exciting couple of years ahead of us as far as gear, and it'll be really cool to see what goes
and
on.
We'll do our best to synthesize that for you as things evolve.
Yep. That's it. Well, that's it for me, guys. Been a fun episode.
Yes,
Use
sir.
pedals.
Yes. All right. So until next week, we will. We hope everybody has an amazing week in Tone Town on their journey, and we will join up with you again next Monday with a new and exciting episode.
See you guys.
Awesome. See ya.